everybody, and welcome back to yet another cracking edition of the Matt Brown Show. This is the Secrets of Fail series, where we are talking to entrepreneurs and CEOs all about their epic business blunders. And with us in the hot seat today is none other than Joseph Ferencz. He is the co-founder and CEO of a very cool company, which we're going to get into now, called Gamefam. Joe, welcome to the show, dude.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Great to have you here, bud. So you know what's coming. So let's start with the elevator pitch. What exactly are you guys up to over there at Gamefam?
Yeah, we are the world's leading developer of content for Roblox, Fortnite, and other UGC gaming and metaverse platforms. We started the business about 4 years ago. We're kind of a combination of career, multi-decade game industry producers, marketers, and strategists, and then kind of 19 to 24-year-old UGC gaming creators. We started the business to create the next generation of mega franchises born off of these platforms. And, we started with 25 players in our first ever game 4 years ago. And I checked this morning, we had 180,000 people playing our games about 5 minutes ago. So it's been a great ride. We've got partnerships with the National Football League, with Sega, with Paramount, with Mattel, and a huge brand partnership and advertising sales business on top of those IP partnerships as well. And every day is an exciting adventure in the metaverse for us.
Exactly. So I was going to ask you about the metaverse. How bullish are you on the metaverse as a concept? Like, do you see us fully in VR metaverse stuff, playing games in the next sort of 18 to 36 months, or what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think that the idea of user-generated content in 3D spaces is pretty well proven at this point, and somewhat undeniable on a historical basis, right? You really can't compete with millions of people just making stuff out of passion with the desire to entertain and then eventually potentially make money off of other people who share their interests and entertainment enjoyment. So I think that we're seeing that when you democratize content, whether that's YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and now Roblox, and then Fortnite, that creates compelling new forms of entertainment and engagement that will find huge audiences. So I'm very bullish. In terms of VR, I don't know. It's coming someday. It'll be better than staring at a screen, but I'm more bullish on it actually for productivity right now than for gaming. But I'd love to be wrong about that.
Yeah, well,
and soon.
If you talk to my son Franklin, who's 8, he'll definitely disagree.
Yeah. All right.
That kid's a VR junkie.
It's always
man.
The youngest players.
Yeah, there's a thing here called Sandbox VR. So every opportunity he can, he's like, Dad, let's go. But he's on Call of Duty and PlayStation like most of the days. So yeah, it's an interesting space to see, especially being a parent. It's very interesting.
Yeah, well, it's always the youngest gamers and the youngest entertainment fans who I think are the most open-minded and who are responsible for platforms like Roblox, Fortnite, and eventually the emergence of a potentially a VR business that is at scale for usage. It's always got to start with people who don't have preconceived notions and who are open to being delighted and entertained by what comes across them. So that's the joy of being a fan and being a gamer, and you never know where it's going to go.
Absolutely. Well, look, let's get into the meat and the potatoes of this series. Joseph, what is your epic story of fail for our audience around the world today?
Yeah, well, this is going to be terribly disappointing, but I've never failed at anything. I've only succeeded at everything I've ever done in life. So it's going to be a very short podcast for you. No, I'm just kidding. I wanted to share a story from a previous startup I was at that was working on a game I was very passionate about. And that game was actually called Night Phone. It was a project between myself, a partner studio in Los Angeles, and a partner studio in Turkey. Both of those studios have gone on to very successful endeavors with partners like Amazon and Zynga. And so these were very talented people. And we had this we had this thing we had been playing around with, and we called it knight foam, like kind of like, a knight, like a medieval knight on a horse with armor and, jousting spear. I don't know what you call that thing. A lance. So a lance, and we had this incredible art style that we were so excited about. Do you know like those 80s movies like Last Unicorn or the Hobbit cartoon from the 80s? These are brilliant pieces of animated content by master animators, and they had this charm and warmth to them. And I can say this confidently because I just went back and watched Last Unicorn again like a month ago. It's probably like the fifth time I've ever seen it in my life. And these movies stand the test of time, and the aesthetic of them was just incredible. And it's just gone by the wayside. And we had this idea to make a game that was a fantasy setting with that aesthetic from these masterful, beloved 80s animated fantasy movies. And the twist was that we were going to make it in pixel art. So it was like a double dose of nostalgia, right? It was like a double espresso of nostalgia with another extra double espresso shot poured into it, was how I thought about it. And we started on the project, and we had a working version of the game, and we were nominated for like a ton of awards at a few different game shows, and we were talking to publishers. And then slowly over time, the people who were funding the project started turning the screws and putting less and less money, paying the bills slower and slower. And eventually, kind of without warning, we ran out of funding, and we never got to see the project through. And it was heartbreaking, right? Because I've gone on to start Gamefam and have, I would say, pretty considerable, success at scale with running a video game business. As I said, the other two partners on the game both have built, multi-million-dollar businesses and raised tens of millions of dollars from investors for their ideas. And so we have this kind of tragic loss of this project that we all just were doing out of like pure excitement that is never going to see the light of day, probably. It's been 5 years, so I think it's probably gone.
Yeah, sure, man. That sucks bad. That sucks so badly. Tell me, what actually happened then from there? Did the whole startup die, and what was the reason for the cash just not the burn? Was the burn too high? Like, what was the issue there?
So I think that the startup that had been funding the project, I think, did eventually go out of business. To be perfectly frank, I was so disappointed with the situation. I kind of lost touch with them. And I think that the burn was consistent, but where we went wrong was not getting to actionable data quickly enough, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Because the more I've worked in the space, the more I start to understand that a video game in the free-to-play setting, right? So like something like a Fortnite or a Candy Crush or a Call of Duty mobile, right? Games that are free to play, free to download. These games are, in a lot of ways, almost e-commerce businesses where the product is fun. You're selling fun to people. You're selling entertainment, and you're getting people to pay for it as they go. And people who want to invest into these projects, people who make their living off of projects like this, they're evaluating the scalability of these things. If you want to have a big team and you want to have high quality professionals making something special, you've got to be able to pay them at competitive market salaries, right? And so you've got to have funding, but you can't have, there's this balance between having enough product to put in the hands of players and having enough product where you can get actionable data from players that you can then use to show momentum and start to generate some revenue for the project, and keeping the project in the tank for too long and never getting to those metrics. So that was where we went wrong, is that you need to be, well, in my opinion, right? We had these dreams. We had these huge, huge creative dreams, and we were bringing them to life. I mean, the game was really, really stunning. I wrote the theme song and recorded it myself. It was this like epic heavy metal, like royal mashup thing. It was so awesome. And we needed to put a little bit less of our dreams and a little bit more practicality into the thing so it could be playable, instead of let's do this before we let players play, let's do that before we let players play, let's add this other feature, let's make sure we have this. We needed to reallocate some of the funds from development into an initial marketing segment and start building a community of players around what was a very special game.
Mm-hmm. So, Joe, there's obviously a lot of lessons that come with an experience like that. What stands out for you as a key thing that you now take forward into, Gamefam as a key lesson or insight?
I think that product strategy and competitive benchmarking as the sanity check on product strategy is a huge pillar. So how much game do we really need in order to ensure that this game actually is going to get some traction in the marketplace? I think our Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game that just came out 2 weeks ago is a great example of that. The game we made at Gamefam with our partners at Paramount. We have a huge vision for this Turtles game, right? But we had to make the movie date because that was a key marketing moment for the franchise that we wanted to be a part of. And I know our partners wanted us to be a part of with the project. So we looked across the Roblox platform and we said, where does this game fit in? What type of players is this game going to attract? And therefore, what are the features that will get the game to a sustainable player community that we can then start to build on? Here's this huge vision we have, right? But given that there's time constraints, given that there's logistics and budget constraints, what do we really need? And being really analytical and objective about that process. That's one of the huge learnings, right? So here's how much I think we need. Now let's go out and benchmark that qualitatively against other products in the market using a series of smart producers, game designers, game analysts to validate it as a consensus building effort. And then 2 is budgeting, right? And I think, of course, this goes without saying in a lot of ways, right? This is obvious that you need to make sure you're allocating your budget. But I think what happens is I think there's a deep entrepreneur's bias and fundamental fallacy that I've seen so many people buy into, including moi, which is that my product is going to be so special, it's going to take the world by storm, and it's not going to require marketing because we're making something so unique, so different, and the whole world is going to immediately take notice.
Yeah. I actually wrote about that in my book. I called it entrepreneur belief. It's like, it's like you just believe so much in the thing that you're going to build that it's so powerful that it like reason and logic and quantitative data, all these things don't matter as much as that. To your point, I think it's actually it's an important thing to do, right? Like, how much am I actually drinking my own Kool-Aid on this thing?
Yeah.
Because there might be a gap in the market, but is there a market in the gap?
Right, exactly. And I think on LinkedIn, I still see, of course, I see people doing this every day. They're so excited before their product even comes out. And I'm like, don't hype your product before it comes out. Hype your product after you've got KPIs. You know what I mean? Like, let your KPIs do the talking for you. And that's how we've grown this company, right? So we started Gamefam with nothing, right? We had 0 players, but we wanted to immediately get data and get traction. And so we produced a series of very small initiatives that were very quick, but immediately started feeding back player data that we could then iterate on, test and learn, and have case studies that we could utilize as we grew the company. And this, again, seems obvious, right? But this is like, more of a, this is a truly logic-driven process where I think so many entrepreneurs are so passionate. And of course, I understand that on a personal level and I respect it. And you've got to figure out where is that line between logic and passion, and which parts of running your business are truly going to be logic driven and which parts are at the end of the logic road. And then you need to lean fully into passion and judgment. And I'm always trying to balance those and have a clear-headed perspective on them.
I couldn't agree with you more, mate. So Joe, if you could get into the Matt Brown Show time machine and kind of go back to yourself when all this shit was going down, like what would you do differently and why?
I would have, on Night Phone, I would have de-scoped the product to say, instead of trying to build a thing that could immediately get to significant usage and revenue, I would have built a smaller slice of the product to say, let me prove that people are going to like this. Yes, they're not going to have long-term retention. They're not going to have high monetization, but let's prove initial engagement and short-term retention, and then let's double down. Let's raise money against it. Let's go back to our investors, or let's get to even better. Let's get to initial revenue and use that revenue to fund the rest of development instead of focusing on industry beating benchmarks out the door, which is, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise. And as an entrepreneur and as a leader, you need to decide which parts of the noise you believe will help you get where you're going to go, and which parts are people talking about ideals or things that are optimal but aren't practical, I guess.
True said, man. Listen, what's your advice, Joe, to other CEOs and entrepreneurs about the importance of, the process of failure in becoming successful in your ambitions?
This is a great podcast, and I think that there's a lot of value in people talking about what went wrong and acknowledging that things do go wrong, and then what they learned from those things going wrong. And I am very passionate about what I do at Gamefam. I'm passionate about the field that we work in as a company, and I'm passionate about doing everything to its best possible effect that I put my hands on. And that doesn't always happen. That doesn't always play out. So I think that, what my advice is it's okay, of course, for things to go wrong, but when things do go wrong, how can you take a sober-minded point of view on what you did wrong, on what you can do differently next time? And of course, I've met entrepreneurs and leaders who things go wrong and they say, look, I did everything right. I just had bad luck or whatever. That is unlikely. It's unlikely. You probably made some mistakes along the way where you could have de-risked things, where you could have had other contingency plans in case things did go wrong, where you didn't weigh risk and reward or cost and benefit properly at the right phase of a project or a business. And so I think my best advice is swallow your pride, that you don't need to prove you're the smartest, that you're the best, that you're going to be the guy who, or person who can do no wrong and who has the golden touch. There's no point in any of that. The only point is results. And if you don't get the results you're looking for, what can you learn so that next time out you can get better results. That's how we approach things at Gamefam. Learning from mistakes is one of our core values. And to that point, I feel, and I tell our teams, and our other leaders tell our teams, it's okay to make mistakes if you knew what your goal was, and then you can learn on how to do better next time. Then that isn't really a mistake. That's really a learning opportunity. And learning is a core value that I have as a person. And it's a core value that I've tried to instill in Gamefam.
Amazing, man. Joe, what about books, tools, and resources that you recommend? What comes to mind for you?
In terms of leadership, there was a great book that I read when I first took on the CEO role here called Hot Seat. I don't remember the name of the author, unfortunately, but I'm sure if you look it up, it's like Hot Seat being a startup CEO, and that really was helpful in preparing me for some of the
Jeff Immelt
areas. Jeff Immelt. Oh, that guy is somebody. I believe, right? He's a big hitter of some kind, I think. So,
former CEO of General Electric.
There you go. Okay, yeah. So my instinct was right on that. That's what I thought. I didn't want to say it wrong, but for the record, I thought he was the former CEO of General Electric. So yeah, that's a smart guy. So yeah, that book was great. I watch, I watch a lot of, YouTube videos from other leaders I admire, right? So that's really important to me is I'm listening to, people like, I'm watching people like Bob Iger. I'm watching, I'm watching leaders I don't like, people like, I won't name any names, but there's certain people in the tech space who I think have a terrible habit of engendering conflict and discord across our society. So I try to, who do I look up to? Watch their interviews, listen to how they talk about things, look at their biographies and their histories. And then, I just try to stay really current on industry podcasts for my industry. I want to know everything. I want to know everything happening, both on the creative side. I watch a humongous amount of gaming criticism. I watch a humongous amount of TikTok, kids playing Roblox. I watch YouTubers playing Roblox, and I listen to industry analysis on a weekly basis. I'm basically always feeding into the subject matter. I love it, and I can't get enough of it. In terms of leadership, though, there's no substitute than going through it trial by fire, but looking at leaders you admire, how do they conduct themselves? How do they deal with challenges? And then modeling yourselves. But even more importantly, every boss I ever had, I took away something. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was really important to me too.
Awesome.
What kind of leader do you not want to be? I think that's really valuable because there's so many bad bosses and bad leaders out there. I want to be a good one.
Mm-hmm. Well, you define yourself by what you say no to more than what you say yes to, I found. And I think especially when you're in the early startups phases, you want to say yes to everything because you feel like you have to. You're chasing everything down, trying to just make cash forever.
Yeah.
Going after everything possible thing. But actually, all you start to do is starve. And so if you learn to say no to 9 things out of 10, the one thing that you get left with, that's what you will expand. And so what you focus on always expands. I mean, even if you take the series, for instance, started off with one episode. Obviously, there's 800 in the show now, but started with one. We've done over, I think, like 125. There's a book coming out. We've got God knows how many, pieces of content coming out around the book. And it's all because you just focused on the one topic. You know what I mean? Because we could have gone and done so many different things, But if we just said, no, fuck that, we're going to do this thing because this is what's important for the world right now, from what I see as being important to the world, and the difference that you want to make, you know. And I think only when you've been through a number of startups, you know, you've had a failed experience, you've sold a company, all things I've done, then you start to have perspective. So in many cases, I almost feel like it's better to be rich in perspective than rich in cash in many senses, because if you have a rich perspective, you can always generate wealth. And oftentimes, if you're just chasing the ones and zeros and the cash in the bank, you wind up building businesses you don't like, or in fact that you hate, also being there. And ultimately you become a miserable person, you know. And so that's what I'm saying. Perspective is really, really, really important. And you know, hearing from you and what you've been through, and you know, and obviously, you know, you're kind of doing a lot of things right. I mean, Gamefam's not a small company, and that's all credit to you, you know.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, at the end of the day, it really is about the people at the business, and who you bring in and how you treat those people. And that is how a business truly becomes successful, because even if you're the most talented entrepreneur in the world, you cannot grow a business to scale on your own. You need great teammates around you, and you need to treat them well, because one great person is you know, can do the work of you know, 25 you know, not as great people, in my opinion. And so I really treasure my colleagues. And I think what you're describing, by the way, is strategy. We're a strategy driven org. We've had 4 core strategies since the day we started the company 4 years ago, and we continue to lean on those 4 strategic pillars. They haven't changed. We go back to them every board meeting. We review them. How are we tracking against them? And I think that that is something that we're very strongly connected to, is the idea of what is the strategy, and it's something on strategy or off strategy. And if you want to do something that's off strategy, then the strategy needs to change. There needs to be a bedrock of logic that defines what you do as a business, in my opinion, or you'll get, as you were saying, you'll get spread in so many different directions, and none of it will create value, because you'll be doing a little bit of too many different things.
Well, Joe, it's been an absolute privilege having you on the show, dude. That does conclude your time in the hot seat.
All right, great. All right.
You see what I did there, everybody?
Yeah.
You see what I did there?
Yes.
Congrats, man, on all your success, and obviously you guys are going to obviously continue to do that. So wishing you and the team all the very best in the future, okay?
All right. Thank you for having me on the show. It was a lot of fun.
Anytime,
Have a great
brother.
rest of the day.
Everybody else, we'll see you again soon. Ciao, ciao.
Thanks.